I'm going to introduce Mitch Wagener. He teaches ecology, the science of climate change, and related courses at Western Connecticut State University in Danbury. In 2019, he received the Aquarian Environmental Champion Award, Individual Communication category, and an official citation from the Connecticut General Assembly for his efforts in climate change education and community service. So I'm going to turn it over to Mitch.
Climate change to me is a moral issue. Those people least responsible for causing climate change are the most vulnerable to it. The people living in the big condos may lose their shirt by the collapse of the real estate market on coastal Florida, but they have options. The people living in the Sundarbans in Bangladesh don't really have many options. So what can you do about it? There are things that we as individuals can do, that you and I can do all by ourselves. You can vote your values. This group, I have no doubt you already vote your values. But other people perhaps could think about it more. You can speak up with your voice, your time, and your money, all of which are signals. We can be active in state and local affairs. We can reduce our own personal and family carbon footprint. Eat less meat and have one fewer child. I tell this to my students, and it's terribly intrusive, that for the good of the world, they might consider having one fewer child than they would otherwise. Not none. The thing is, this generation, I'm around college students all the time, kind of get that anyway. And so they tend to have fewer children when they start having children than perhaps their grandparents did. There are other things that we as individuals can't have a lot of effect with, and they are things that must be addressed at scale, at larger scale, which means that governments and companies, perhaps if they're got their heads on straight, can deal with these, which is one of the reasons why we vote our values, because we want people in that will use the machinery of government for this. And they would include educating children about climate change. Cap all the zombie oil wells. There's a whole bunch of oil wells around that were just abandoned when they were pumped reasonably dry. And what happens is those open pipes just spew methane. Methane is a very strong greenhouse gas. And so these things are just spewing methane all the time. You wouldn't know it unless you had an infrared camera. Okay, we got to cap all those things, and that's going to require government to do that. We need to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels. We are paying the fossil fuel companies a horrendous amount of money to wreck our lives, our children, grandchildren's lives. We need to facilitate shift towards renewables, however we can do that, and regenerative agriculture. There's another word, regenerative, you're going to hear a lot. We need to develop less leaky refrigeration systems, because CFCs that are in refrigeration are the devil's own greenhouse gas. They are crazy, strong greenhouse gases. We need to make education available to all girls in the world, and we need to make family planning available to all women in the world. And that's just the truth of it. If you're inspired to do something in terms of climate change, find something you can do and do it. Don't worry about what you can't do. Just do what you can. It's going to be a combination of individual activity. It's also going to be organized things happening at scale. If my grandson Leon has a decent world to grow up in. So it'll get better. Will it be what we would like? No. But you know what? This is a democracy, right? So if you don't like the way things are going, let them know. Albert Camus, French novelist, wrote a novel called The Plague, in which there's this line which is very appropriate now, because it really talks about our response to climate change. I have to tell you this whole thing is not about heroism. It's about decency. It may seem a ridiculous idea, but the only way to fight the plague is with decency. And I would say that the way we fight climate change is with decency and humanity and compassion above all else. Moral imperative 2, We're now seeing the effects of climate change. This is the world that we made. We can't escape it entirely. If we act quickly, decisively, we can slow the damage, and we owe that to our grandchildren. And here's mine. Leon De Los Santos, 3 years old, lives in New Haven. That's our older daughter there walking behind him. He's an inspiration to me, and I'm sure that as your grandchildren are to you. I would be willing to entertain questions.
Hi, thank you. I have a comment for Mitch from George. His message for what we should do is very much a humanistic message. I applaud him for that.
Amy made a comment about education.
I just reinforced what Mitch had said about education for women, because that doesn't have to be in college education. Even a few grades more of education has a huge difference. That's why there are so many small microfinancing groups that are targeted to women and education to women, because they tend to see that their kids get educated as well, and they have fewer kids. So it becomes a virtuous cycle.
Right. Exactly right. And that's why there's an organization called Operation Drawdown that analyzes all the things that humans could do to address this and tries to model how much each one of them would affect, so that they can list them, from the most efficacious to the least efficacious. Taken together, the most important thing is the combination of educating women and providing family planning. More than solar energy, more than tightening up air conditioning systems and all that stuff. Those two things are a non-technical cause that can really do a lot of good. And think about the part of the world's population which will be emancipated through that.
Thank you, Professor Wagener. From Diane. Another Diane says, thank you, Dr. Wagener. Really appreciate your perspective, especially about education, family planning of women and girls.